It was an attack that shook Turkey to its core and reverberated across the world. A massacre of 39 people in one of Istanbul's most popular nightclubs. Police say Abdulkadir Mashripov confessed to the mass shooting. His trial began in December. Mashripov said the attack was in retaliation for Turkey's operations against Daesh and would continue if Ankara didn't stop. Many, including the country's top leadership, believe the attack was also aimed at widening the divide between secularists and conservatives in the country.
Olaya atfedilen değerler üzerinden bir çatlak oluşturup toplumu kutuplaştırmak olduğu çok açıktır.
Instead, people in Turkey came out in unity against the attack as Ankara launched a massive investigation into Daesh terror suspects. Daesh carried out its first confirmed attack on Turkish soil in March 2014. Since then, it's killed at least 304 people in more than a dozen attacks across the country. The worst include the bombing of a political rally in Ankara that killed 109 people, and a suicide bomb attack on a wedding in Gaziantep that left 57 people dead. The attack on the Reina nightclub in Istanbul resulted in security forces tracking down suspected members of Daesh. Dozens of people accused of being foreign militants, like the Reina assailant himself, were arrested, while hundreds of others were accused of being facilitators or sympathizers and were detained. Turkish forces also upped their offensive in tandem with the anti-Daesh coalition in Syria and Iraq. That offensive has now effectively uprooted Daesh's control from much of the region. These methods seem to have been effective, especially in Turkey. Since the attack on Reina, Daesh hasn't carried out a single significant attack in a major Turkish city. Well, I'm here now in Ortaköy, close to where Reina is located. It's about half a kilometer down that way on the waterfront. It was demolished a few months after the attack. But now a year later, the crowds have returned here. Last night, hundreds of people were out here celebrating the new year, and with them, a sense of security seems to have returned to Istanbul. But some fear this security could once again come undone. A recent deal between rival Syrian forces allowed Daesh militants to escape sieges on their strongholds.
The SDF commander came back with the backing of the US administration, agreed for those terrorists to head to Deir al-Zor. They took guarantees, some families with them as human shields so that they would not be targeted. That day we put out a false announcement that there had been mediation by tribal figures.
Officials say this includes foreign fighters, and the way home for them runs through Turkish territory. Could this allow the terror group to resume attacks, or have the Turkish authorities fully adapted to the threat? Shoaib Hassan, the Newsmakers.
Well, to discuss this, I'm joined from Ankara by Sertaç Korkmaz. He's a terrorism expert and a researcher at the Center for Middle Eastern Strategic Studies. In Washington, we have Ted Karasik. He's an advisor at the think tank Gulf State Analytics. And completing our panel from New York is Ali Çınar. He's the president of the Turkish Heritage Organization. Gentlemen, I thank you very much for joining us. Sertaç, let me begin with you. It was a horrendous attack a year ago, and it was after 18 months of constant terror attacks in Turkey, especially in the major cities, but a relatively quiet year now. To what do you attribute the quiet year?
Turkish counterterrorism forces, especially police units, started to neutralize lots of tens of terrorist cells inside the country, especially cities like Istanbul, Ankara, Konya, Izmir, Antalya, Gaziantep. These are important for Daesh because these are metropolitan cities. They can easily hide themselves among the high dense population. They started to use this population to hide themselves, and successfully intelligence cooperation between Turkish national security units, especially Turkish National Intelligence Agency and Turkish National Police, led to get concrete results during the year.
Okay.
Hundreds of Daesh members arrested.
Okay. So So we've got, two things going on here, right? You have Daesh in Iraq and Syria losing land and perhaps stronger security and stronger intelligence. Ted, which one was the overriding factor? Stronger security, stronger intelligence from Turkey, or the fact that Daesh is losing operational capability?
I think it's a combination of all of these factors simply because the Islamic State has collapsed. I'm sorry. The Islamic State has basically collapsed, and fighters are now traveling and migrating, if you will, across the Turkish border. There are many security officials, intelligence agencies, and so on who are capturing these individuals on the border. It's stopping the flow of potential terrorists to Turkey. That's a success. Before this, however, there were a lot of people who were able to get into Turkey, and as the previous speaker was talking about, they were able to nest in major urban areas. I think Turkish counterintelligence has been able to get on top of this movement, if you will, within Turkey. The big question to me is to the degree that Turkey will become targeted further throughout the course of 2018 because of the President Erdogan's push within the region to boost Turkey's foreign policy prowess. This might draw extra attention from the escaping jihadists.
Okay, and this is interesting. So, Ali, in a way, it's what's happened over the past year, or the quiet year in Turkey, seems to have made a mockery of the theory that the more ground that Daesh loses, the more likely they are to lash out and conduct terror attacks in other cities and capitals. And it's harder to hit a place like Paris than it is to hit a place like Istanbul or Ankara. So Turkey was seen as the softest target. And the idea was, the more ground they lose, the more they're going to attack you. That hasn't happened as they've lost ground. So what's going on here, Ali? What's at the genesis of this?
Well, I mean, it's a good point that Daesh frustration in Syria and Iraq impacting on other countries, including Turkey and some European cities. But the Turkish military also was very active in Syria to take against, fighting against terrorism in the region, because you cannot protect the terror activities in only Turkey. So, and the intelligence sharing, Turkish military and the Turkish police divisions are very stronger fighting against Daesh and PKK. So we see a much stronger results right now in the region. And the border right now, when we look at the border security, it's also stronger comparing with 2016. As I said, there's a big frustration from the Daesh. So they start to move to the other countries to, have some more chaos in other countries. But Turkey was very successful in 2017 fighting against terror. And it seems like 2018 also, Turkey will be taking more actions against terrorist groups.
Right. So, Sertaç, Turkey has foiled terror plots. It has arrested Daesh suspects. We saw in the past week, hundreds were rounded up. There was tight security over New Year's Eve across the country, but particularly in the big cities. All of this under the umbrella of a state of emergency. So people will say, okay, fine, this is great. We're being kept safe. Our people are not being blown up by terrorists as they had been in 2015 and 2016. But then there's another question that has to be added to that. Can this only work under a state of emergency? Will the state of emergency be forever and ever for as long as there's a terror threat?
I think we should underline the importance of emergency situation, because if we maximize the national security of Turkey, we need this during the whatever we need. We have to consider the importance of this emergency situation, but to get effective results, concrete results against counter-terrorist threats, we should maximize the security countermeasures to minimize these threats.
Okay, let me ask. Okay, fair enough. So let me ask Ali. Ali, would the state of emergency need to go on for as long as is necessary, because it seems to be working in foiling terror and has for 12 months?
I mean, it seems like it's working. I mean, remember that Turkey is fighting against terror. It's not only Daesh, PKK, Daesh, KPJ, that there are different terror organizations in Turkey. So because of the national security risk, the emergency right now is needed, and it will continue, it seems like, in 2018, and it's working for Turkey. And when we see the terror activities less and less in Turkey, then the Turkish administration will decide to remove the emergency decision. But for now, it seems like 2018, it will continue to fight against terror because of the many terror organizations operating in Turkey.
Yeah. Ted, what you said about Turkey and President Erdogan pushing more deeply into the region or broadly into the region, perhaps making Turkey more of a target, maybe it's the other way around. Because I think of what President Putin had said to President Erdogan in his New Year's message, and I've got the quote here. He said, "By working closely together, our countries have succeeded in preventing the terrorist threat from spreading further across the Middle East." What if, Ted, it's the other way around? What if, in the past couple of years, as Turkey has strengthened its relations with Russia, has got on at the table with the Russians and the Iranians at Astana and so forth, that has made Turkey less of a target, and maybe the policy a couple of years before that made Turkey more of a target? Could that be plausible, perhaps?
It is plausible indeed. I think it's important to look at the Russian-Turkish relationship when it comes to countering terrorism. Clearly, the two countries share intelligence on this issue. Although I would have to argue that Turkey came into the intelligence picture later, whereas Russia was working with Jordan and some other countries about tracking down Daesh in the Levant. The important point here is that the intelligence services of Russia and other countries in the region are able to work together to prevent terrorists from migrating through Turkey, if you will. And we're seeing these migration routes out of the Levant, not just through Turkey, but through other routes as well. So the cooperation between Russia and Turkey perhaps is pushing Daeshites to migrate through other routes and away from Turkey. So that might be a factor.
Right. Ali, as you mentioned, Turkey is facing multiple threats. So it's not just Daesh, it's the PKK, it's DHKPC, it's the Gulen movement, FETÖ, also listed a terror organization. Now, they all operate differently. Daesh as a kind of nihilistic jihadi organization, the PKK kind of Marxist-Leninist, similar to the FARC and how they did it in Colombia, DHKPC far left with bombs, FETÖ more like a criminal syndicate. So you've got all these various ways these groups operate. They have a different modus operandi depending on which group you look at. How do you then have a specific policy for each group, or do you just have a broad anti-terror strategy that scoops them all up? Surely that wouldn't work.
It's very difficult to collaborate for these different terror organizations because the strategy and the activities are totally different. The FETÖ is more active on the lobbying side and the PR, but the Daesh is more active, PKK are active on the ground. So the Turkey has to have a different strategy fighting against these terror groups. And in the meantime, it's very important to collaborate with the allies. I mean, Russia is also important right now for the fighting against Daesh, but Turkey still needs United States support for the intelligence sharing. It's very important that Turkey collaborates with European Union and United States for fighting terror organizations. So it's a kind of collaboration, but at the same time act a different strategy for each terror organizations at this moment.
Sertaç, do you worry that the more strained relations there are between Turkey and the European Union or Turkey and the United States, it hasn't been great recently, that perhaps they'll be coordinating less on terror and trying to stop terrorism?
At international level, we need more cooperation. If you don't make more cooperation between countries like between United States and Turkey or European Union and Turkey, we can't defeat terrorism alone. We need more cooperation. Just remember, last week there was another support on international level combating against terrorism by United States. There was a draft at UN titled 23 in 96. It was based on cooperation, increasing cooperation between countries to get more detailed data about persons to prevent possible terrorist attacks in future by which are possible to come by foreign terrorist fighters. I give importance to international cooperation.
Yeah, and there was a criticism that among the Europeans there wasn't cooperation before the airport attack because one of the attackers was allegedly flagged by Turkey beforehand, but that wasn't taken seriously by a European nation. Ted, a year from now, on the first day of 2019, are we going to be talking about Daesh in the past tense and a diminished terror threat not only in Turkey but worldwide?
Unfortunately, I think it's going to continue and spread. I think it's important to understand that the philosophy of Daesh is, to me, like an airborne disease. It's able to infect other people who are where Daesh's message appeals to them. It's anti-civilization, it's anti-social. So we're seeing Daesh pop up in other places, like in Southeast Asia, and the Philippines, and Sinai, and so on, Libya. This expansion is going to continue of the ideology. So I do not see this year a retreat of Islamic State. In fact, I see them trying to push their agenda in other regions.
Ali, do you share that pessimism regarding Daesh, or are you more optimistic?
Well, I mean, I'm also try to be more optimistic, but even right now, Daesh is lose the power in the region. There are many Daesh members overall, including United States. Recently, there was a Daesh member tried to act in close to the Times Square, and the NYPD act quickly and then did a good job on this. So there are still Daesh members all over the globally right now, and it's gonna impact. Unfortunately, I'm not pessimistic, but globally there should be a more coordination, more cooperation, fighting against terror, because even the terror organization is not based in Syria or Iraq. There are a lot of members based in different countries try to attack on the public area. So globally, we have to be very careful who are we dealing with.
Okay, gentlemen, unfortunately, I've got to wrap, but it's been fascinating picking your brains. Thank you very much for joining us, Ali Çınar, Sertaç Korkmaz, and Ted Karasik. Thanks for joining us on the Newsmakers.